Welcome back, guys. Or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's the Ford Focus RS. And not only is it relatively rare, pretty quick, and probably the best hot hatch America's ever seen, but it's actually not perfect. There's some detrimental flaws, and today I get to share all the good, the bad, and the ugly, so you can expect to see a walk around, all the specs, initial driving impressions, 0 to 60 on GPS, and then my final thoughts to help you decide if a Ford Focus RS is potentially worth your time and money, or if you should look at the competition like the GR Corolla, or maybe the Civic Type R. And big thanks to Twin Falls Subaru for letting me borrow theirs for the day. I'll link it below if you're interested. Otherwise, let's dive right in with this review. But if you're unfamiliar with the Focus RS, you really should know that these third generation Focuses were produced between 2010 to 2018, because after 2018, that's when Ford decided to pull the plug on a lot of their passenger cars to make more trucks and SUV. So the plant that used to turn Fords into Ford Focus RSs now turns them into Ford Rangers. But these are pretty cool. Even though Ford sold about 150,000 Focuses in the US every single year, roughly about 500 a month were actually the RS. So they are pretty rare. You really don't see very many, and it's only a few percent of the total Focuses that were made during this year. But the RS is extra special. Instead of being a front-wheel drive 160 horsepower 4-cylinder 2-liter, this one makes about 350 horsepower, has all-wheel drive, has a drift mode, and sounds really good. So even though these came with a more aggressive front end, 13.4-inch rotors on the front wheels with those really nice blue painted Brembo brakes, it has the rear wing on the hatch, and probably more RS badges than I can count. It's not perfect because at the end of the day, it's starting its life as a Ford Focus, which is a 4-star crash test rated vehicle, one that likely can't fit full-size adults in the back seat, at least not comfortably, or people you care about, and it has a lot of hard materials on the inside, basically everything that hasn't been upgraded for the RS trim level, and it cost 40 grand when these were new, which in 2024 money is about $51,000, which is a pretty heavy price tag, and in fact a lot more than Civic Type Rs and GR Corollas of today. And we're not even getting to the head gasket issue that these things were known to have, including my friend who back in 2016, he bought one new, and about 20,000 miles later is when Ford had to replace that for him. But as you'd expect, hot hatches are built off of their economy counterpart, high volume, high selling vehicles that because of their success, the manufacturer can justify an enthusiast model. And honestly, Ford did a really good job with this one. I've driven a lot of hot hatches, I've driven a lot of sports cars and powerful cars, and there's nothing like a lightweight, high revving, low end torque, fun car, and especially when you have all-wheel drive and the ability to throw most of that power to the rear. This is one of the funnest cars, as you'll see in my driving impressions, but you have to wait a few more minutes for that. And for those of you wondering, these are really fun to drive around town because they're so compact in their size. They're only 14.3 feet long, about 6 feet wide, and 5 feet tall. The wheelbase is about 8.6, so it really is planted on the road, especially where these weigh about 3,400 pounds, which is, I'd say, on par for this class. And then this actually has a pretty impressive payload capacity of over 800 pounds, so you can carry 800 pounds worth of people and stuff while having just over 5 inches of ground clearance, which is probably the minimum you want on something like this. It even has a fairly aggressive 406 final drive ratio, so although it's not the best at MPG, it is pretty dang decent at putting the power down, and it can do a full circle on 37 feet, which, because it is kind of front-wheel drive biased when you're not in drift mode, you can feel that it doesn't turn super well when the rear is planted. Just to elaborate a little bit more on the turning, in a parking lot at slow speeds, it does not feel agile, it just feels like a front-wheel drive Focus. But when you're going fast, the rear does feel stiff and it does handle noticeably better than you think you would. And you can take corners quite a bit faster, but at slow speeds especially, it does not feel anything like a Miata or a BRZ. And this is the key. Another RS badge on it. And when you lock the door, the fuel door does not lock. So the bums can try to siphon your 13.9 gallons, and this does require premium fuel, 91 octane or higher. And then this is rated for about 19 city, about 26 highway. But in my driving around town, after resetting the trip odometer, I can easily get closer to 30. The wheels are actually pretty impressive too, although this does have aftermarket wheels. They are 235/35/19 and blue painted calipers in the rear. And thankfully you can leave that in your pocket because this has proximity key features to lock and unlock the vehicle. The driver's side door panel has a lot of those hard materials, but honestly for 8 years old and 34,000 miles, they've held up pretty well. Nice blue RS stitching, nice handle, thin but solid. Bottle holder, some snacks, and speakers, these are Sony, which is pretty cool. RS again on the door sill. No mats currently on this one, but you do have rubberized pedals. You have your OBD2 port, knee airbag, lighting options, ventilation. And those are the Recaro seats. They are powered for the driver and they are heated, and they actually do get pretty hot, and they look really nice. Lots of bolstering, and they do a fantastic job to hold you in place when you're going around a corner at speed. Sitting inside here though actually is pretty nice. I'm 5'11", and it does feel tight. It does feel like a smaller car, but it's easy to find a comfortable driving position. The horn, it's actually pretty loud, just sounds like a Ford carryover. A little bit of RS badging, some blue stitching, and then you have your controls for the center display on the left, your voice and volume on the right. And overall, it's actually a pretty nice place to be when you fired right up with the push button start, clutch in. A little bit of an RS badge pops up, which is cool. And it comes right to life. The leather wrapped wheel feels nice. It actually is heated on this one with the heated seats. And then you have your drive modes. You have traction control, auto start stop, which this even had, which is kind of interesting. And then when you go through the drive modes, you can see that you have normal, sport, track, and drift, which is just adding to the characteristics of the RS, where you don't even have something like an eco mode. Everything in this is about having fun. You have a boost gauge, oil temp, and oil pressure up top, which is nice. Just an outdated screen from Ford at this point. Sony speakers do sound pretty decent listening to them earlier. You have a plug-in right there, a little bit of storage. The shifter is really nice and notchy, but when you go into reverse, you have to go up and over. The camera has trajectory lines that do move, but I'm really not a big fan of the clutch. I don't know if you guys can see this down here. There's a little bit of pressure, like kind of squish right there, and then it finally engages, and the clutch engages partway through the pressure right there. So it's not very linear, and it's really not my favorite. Otherwise, you have the e-brake right here on the driver's side where it belongs, some deep cup holders, and a little bit of a lifty tray with a 12 volt and a USB in there. Very small storage because this is a very small car at 14 feet long, but you do have kind of a fun popping out sunglass holder. These actually do come off and slide, and then you have probably the least bright incandescent light I've ever seen on a mirror to check yourself out like that. But overall, not too bad. It is very dark in here. There's not a lot of natural light, and that's even with these windows not being tinted on any of them. But with that said, let's hop out and I'll show you how tight the back seat is. All the same type of materials back here and the same design language, no surprises. You even get some blue stitching, and it is fairly soft on the door card. This is the small 60 split, and it's actually pretty heavy to lift and lower, and just look at how tiny these seats are back here. But there is a good amount of storage and you can easily access it, and a tiny bit of storage right here. But sitting behind my driver position, my knees are not going to be very happy for very long, but at least it's a pretty nice view from back here. Nothing on the back of the center console, and no armrest that folds down, but these seats with the suede and the blue stitching is actually pretty nice. With that said, let's try to hop out and I'll show you the hatch. The back of the RS, which is a lot of what the other hatch owners are going to be seeing, actually looks really good. And there's two main ways to get in the back because it's not a power lift gate. So either unlock it with the remote or just the button under the Ford emblem, or crawl through the back seats. But I'm just going to do the easier option, which is the one finger method. Back here you have 24 cubic feet of room. When you drop the seats though, you have about 45. So back here it actually is pretty decent, and it doesn't slant too aggressively, that you can actually fit an okay amount of stuff. You do have the privacy shade, which can easily unclip, but it gets pretty tight once you lay down those front seats. Just remember how it looked when I was sitting back there. And though no fixed flat kit, but you do have a Sony sub, you do have some of your computer controls, and then just extra storage with your eye bolt back here. Nothing new on the passenger rear. All the same design language. You do have a speaker, you do have a Mac pocket, and then this is the 40 split. And if you get a ride shotgun, you get the proximity key features again to lock and unlock, which is pretty cool. Same type of door panel as the front, minus a few of the extra controls. Instead, Ford gives you an extra little storage spot. RS on the door sill. No power options on this Recaro seat, but my backpack doesn't care. It's having a good time. Recaro is listed, RS is listed. No transmission tunnel or above the glove box storage, but you do have the Ford Performance book in here, and actually quite a bit of storage, even though there's no 12 volt or anything else. But with that said, let's come around to the front, pop the hood, and I'll show you what the high performance little 2.3 liter Ecoboost looks like. Under the hood, you have a 350 horsepower at 6,000 RPM, little 2.3 liter Ecoboost. It also makes a rather impressive 350 foot-pound-feet of the twisty stuff at 3,200 RPM, so you really don't have to rev it out that much to have a lot of fun around town. And you have the RS cold air intake, which just adds to the performance, because this has basically a few updates over the basic 2.3 liter Ecoboost Mustang that made about 310 horsepower at the same time, or this was basically very similar to the high performance pack Ecoboost Mustang. But you'll notice that your reservoirs are kind of on the periphery, scattered around. This is a transversely mounted engine. You can see the bracket holding the engine on the side, and the belt is on the passenger side as well. And this is what I don't love about hot hatches, is there's not always a whole lot of room to work on it, especially when they cram a slightly bigger engine into a slightly smaller body. So although that's an amazing formula, until you have to work on it, there's just not a whole lot of room under the hood of this one. And you have the battery, the fuse box, and all the other things you might have to access at some point on the periphery. Anyways, let's drop the hood, take it for a drive. This is my favorite part. I'm going to time travel and teleport you guys to one of my favorite roads, show you how it drives. We'll do the 0 to 60 on GPS, and then we'll meet back here for my final thoughts. Initial driving impressions of the Focus RS. It's pretty fun. Definitely feels like a nice hot hatch. I've ridden one of these before, but it was when these were brand new back in 2016, and I haven't driven one or been in one since. Since then, though, I've driven all the other hot hatches, minus the Corolla GR. And how does it compare in driving feel? Driving confidence and performance compared to those in stock form? Well, for being from 2016, right when the Evo disappeared, when it left the chat, and the Corolla GR wasn't in the US yet, I think this was really good back then, and I understand why a lot of people called it a hyper hatch. The steering really is pretty sharp, feels very good for a vehicle that started its life, has 160 horsepower, front wheel drive, 4-cylinder Ford Focus that costs like 15 grand. The downshifts are pretty easy. We'll take a corner up here with just a little bit of speed. I'm not a big fan though of the clutch. I don't think it does a great job, but it turns sharp, quickly, you know, can leave the hole. I think this would be really fun on a track, and the Recaros hold me in quite well. I don't feel like I'm sliding around. My backpack's not sliding around. Overall, I think we're having a really good time, but the steering really is sharp, really is precise, and even at speed, having the rear wheels helping to push you forward, I think it gives you a lot of confidence that you're not going to lose control nearly as easily as a front-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive only car. So did Ford do good on this one? I think they did. A lot of the materials in here though, there are, you know, throwbacks to the basic Focus. Of course you have the boost gauge, you know, super glued on there. The shifter, I do like the shifter, it's notchy. Here's a little bit of a bump. Ooh. And that stiff suspension, you can definitely feel that, similar to, say, my Miata or BRZ, both of which I've driven in the last week. And how does this compare to those? Pretty good for the same similar mid-$30,000 ballpark. I think this is a pretty nice vehicle. And those Brembo brakes slow you down really well, even at half pedal right there. It sounds good too. There's a lot of tuning potential in this little boosted 2.3 liter EcoBoost, and the power kicks in really low in the RPM. This is a pretty impressive engine, and knowing that it's American, that there's a lot of aftermarket support, I think really goes a long way. Of course, if you own one of these or you're considering one, check into the head gasket issue that was present on some of those earlier Focuses. But overall, I can't complain too much. I think if you guys are in the market for one of these, go check one out, test drive it, have some fun with it. This one, being 8 years old, feels totally stable, and I don't really have any reasons to not recommend one to you guys. It's an enthusiast car. It's one of the rarest hot hatches available, and honestly, I've seen more GR Corollas than Focus RSs in the last year or two. And that's saying something, because there really aren't very many of these. I do see a lot of the Focus STs, and those really aren't that impressive. But the RS, as noted on the steering wheel badge and about 40 other places, it's pretty cool. Let's get to the private road, do a 0 to 60. 0 to 60 in the Focus RS. Density altitude's 3,400 feet, so even though it's turboed, it's still down on power 6 or 7%. This is going to be a light launch, and we'll see what it can do. Not too bad, true 0 to 60 came in at 590, so a little bit faster if we subtract rollout. Given the fact that we're not on a drag strip and we are above sea level by quite a bit, that's really not too bad for this hot hatch. If you've made it this far, guys, I congratulate you, as my voice gets more and more hoarse just trying to get over a cold. But I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to drive the RS, because this is a crazy hot hatch. I understand why some people even called it a hyper hatch back in 2016. And for 40 grand at the time, it was not a cheap ride, especially when some dealers unfortunately showed dealer greed and tried to mark these up. They really didn't sell as many as I thought they should have, with how good of a performer this was. But for 40 grand, you could buy a slightly used C7 Corvette. You could buy a brand new Mustang GT. There's a lot of performance competition at this price point, but nothing that looked quite like this. That was a 350 horsepower hatchback, when most of the other hatchbacks could barely break over 300 like the STI and the Civic Type R. This was really cool, and I'm glad I got to drive it today. I strongly recommend you guys give it a drive, give it a go if you're considering one of these. A lot of them seem to be in the $30,000 ballpark, and I'm not surprised that they're holding their value, because there just aren't that many of them on the road. But it's a cool vehicle. It feels stout, it feels solid, and other than being a bit small and, you know, the Ford characteristics I mentioned earlier being based off of the Focus, I really don't have any concerns or any reasons to not recommend it to you guys if that's what you're interested in. Anyways, if you like this video, if you found it helpful in any way, please consider liking this video. That shows YouTube that you want to see more stuff like that. That shows me that you want me to make more stuff like this. Comment your thoughts and opinions below, and subscribe if you haven't already. I always post at least once a week, and I hope to see you on the next one. Until then, take care.